everyone. Just going to be doing a live Q&A with Sue McCloud. Give us a second to get started, but thanks so much for being here. Hey, Asma. Hey, Hanan. Hey, Christy. Happy Friday. Ooh, happy Friday to everyone. Just going to give Sue a couple seconds to jump on. I'm doing well, thanks. I'm just in my studio. It's funny, actually, I haven't been down here in a little while. I've been working on the computer a lot of late because I've been working on my revised professional practices course, which I'm hoping to launch next week, which is super exciting. In that course, I sort of go boot camp for artists, as I like to think of it, in terms of all the professional development stuff you need to know to be an artist. You know, artist statements, websites, bios, CVs, applying to shows, all the things, social media. So if you're interested in that, you want to head over and sign up for my newsletter. Hey, Sue. Sue's here. So just... There we go.
Hey.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
I'll set up. My tripod.
I know that I've got one of those selfie ring lights, so it looks like I have this like white light in the middle.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, sometimes you can do it sometimes so they're like, if you're far enough away, they're right in the middle of your pupils, but I can never figure that out. So.
Oh yeah, make you look dazzling.
Yeah.
Okay, I gotta turn my volume up. Hello, everybody.
Yeah, thanks so much everyone for being here. We got lots of folks, which is exciting.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah,
Hey.
so I'll introduce myself and introduce Sue, and then we'll get going. So my name is Naomi Clement. I'm a member of Make and Do, the Canadian Ceramics Collective. We sort of support and promote Canadian ceramics both here at home and to folks around the world because we think we're pretty freaking awesome. And I teach virtual workshops. I make work as well. You may be familiar with some of my pots. I work with a lot of underglazes, predominantly the Amico underglazes. And I teach workshops all about that, my process. So if you want to head over to the link in my bio, I'm at Naomi K. Clement. And you can find out more information about learning from me. I teach all sorts of different things and virtual workshops, obviously, of late. And that's sort of how Sue and I got connected. We were both on a Q&A panel thing for a focus group, basically, about teaching virtually. And I got introduced to Sue through that and was excited to see someone else sort of teaching virtually in similar ways to I was. And then we started chatting sort of business stuff. And then I saw, I'm very grateful there are folks like Sue in the world because I am not a glaze chemistry, dig into the science kind of person at all. And I often get a lot of questions from folks in my workshops about that kind of thing. And so it's been great to just say, head on over to Sue's Facebook group, Understanding Glazes with Sue. She's the Canadian glaze guru, and she'll help you out. And she's got lots of great courses as well. And I'm sure she'll talk about that a bit today. But we're here today to chat specifically about underglazes and sort of troubleshooting some issues with underglazes, but also about this project that Sue has on the go, a research project specifically geared towards troubleshooting underglazes. So I'll pass it over to Sue. And then we'll just mention for folks, we're going to save this in the IGTV on Make and Do's feed. So if you come in late, we'll try not to sort of answer the same question again and again, but you'll have the opportunity to watch the video again. And so without further ado, I'll hand it over to Sue.
Yeah, hi. So I'm Sue McCloud and I live in Sooke, British Columbia. That's just outside of Victoria. And I've worked as a studio technician at a public studio in Victoria for about 6 years. And then I also teach about glazes. So that's been my passion basically since I started with pottery. I went to Kootenai School of the Arts in Nelson, and in our second year, we learned how to mix glazes from scratch, and I just fell in love with it right then. We tested hundreds of glazes with David Lawson. That was our my glaze instructor, and yeah, I've just been like exploring down the glaze rabbit hole ever since. So that was 2009 when I first got started with glazes. And so, yeah, so I have an online course. I have one where I teach you how to mix glazes from scratch. That's open for registration right now. And you can click the link in my bio. All the important links are in there. So you can do that after we finish talking. And then I teach another course called Mastering Glaze Consistency online. And registration will be opening for that in October. And that's where we just talk about like getting consistent glaze results. So where you're you know, when you open the kiln and your results are different every single time and the frustrations that can come from that. So I talk a lot about specific gravity, like the water content of your glazes, and just like flocculation and deflocculation and lots of technical stuff, but I simplify it so that it's easy to understand. And then I have this Facebook group called Understanding Glazes with Sue. And I started that like in, I don't know, 4 years ago, I think. And it's just like growing and growing. There's over 13,000 people in there now. So if you ever have issues with your glazes, please join that group. And there's so many knowledgeable people that are just like waiting to answer your questions, myself included. And so that's a really good resource. And the group is all about learning. So there's no stupid questions. Beginners are welcome. And so it's all like every post has a teaching learning opportunity. So please join that group after. And then the thing about underglazes is that I don't regularly use underglazes in my work. I do have experience with them. I've done a bunch of silk screening in the past. I use Chrysanthos. So this is Chrysanthos Underglaze. It's a Plainsman product, and I think they're being discontinued, but I bought these back when I was in school. So like in 2009, I bought a bunch of colors and they've just lasted forever. And I haven't actually experienced a lot of issues with underglazes, but my students are always sending me photos, and in the Facebook group as well, I get a lot of questions about getting like firing defects with underglazes, and I kept seeing like the same question, the same problems happening over and over, and like I just really love problem solving and trying to like troubleshoot ceramics problems. And so I just decided that I could be like the hub of this research project where everyone could send me all of their information about the problems they've been having, and then I can look at all of it and hopefully come up with some like a process that you could follow in order to avoid the problems that people have been having with underglazes. So some of those problems are like blistering and bubbling. I'm seeing a lot over certain colors of underglaze. Crawling, so crawling is where the glaze pulls away from the clay body, and it either exposes the underglaze underneath, or it actually pulls the underglaze away and exposes the clay body underneath. And I've seen both of these issues occur with different types of underglazes. So there's crawling, blistering, and bubbling. There's like where the underglaze flakes off or shivers, where it's like kind of peels off. You get shards and chunks of glaze that are flaking off of your pot after the firing. And a lot of the issues, it's like, so I have this survey that you can fill out, and the link is posted in my bio. And so the things I ask you are like, what stage was your clay in when the underglaze was applied? So some people are applying underglaze at leather hard, some people apply it at bone dry, some people apply after bisque. some people apply it after bisque and then they bisque fire again. So there's all these different conditions. And so I'm just looking for patterns with the different brands of underglaze to see if I can come up with like, oh, if you, like thickness seems to be a common issue if the underglaze layer is too thick. But then it's like, oh, if you rebisque, if you apply the underglaze before bisque, then you avoid certain problems. But then the other issues can come up. And so it doesn't, so I'm like trying to figure out like what the answer is. And there's so many different brands of underglaze. And so there's like the survey will ask you all of these questions and you can just answer the questions that you know the answers to. It's okay to leave questions blank, but I would love it if you're having issues with your underglazes, if you could go fill out that survey. I have 97 responses so far, and my goal has been 100 before I like really dive into the research. And I also have if you want to do, I've designed a test that you can do that could eliminate the causes of some of these problems, where you take your clay body, you test your underglaze at different thicknesses, at different stages of clay. And so that is posted on my website. If you want to follow the steps and do some testing and then send me your results, and then I can like advise you further, that would be awesome as well. So
cool. Yeah, well, hopefully we can get you over 100 folks signing your survey, because this is info that's going to help everyone, right?
Yeah, totally. And then I will publish all of my findings, whether they're conclusive or not. Like I'll put a report together and present that just so everyone has the information that I've collected. So
very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been working with underglazes since grad school, so I don't really want to do the math, but 2017, 2016, and I've always used the Amico ones, which I found, pretty user-friendly. I always apply them at the leather hard stage. The tricky stuff with my work is like what I'm doing. I put all the underglaze on below. Sue and I started chatting about this afterwards, and I'm using a super dark clay. It's like a chocolate, it's a standard 266, a chocolate stoneware. So I've always assumed that a lot of the issues I have with certain underglazes are because of the clay, not as much the underglaze, but it's interesting to see if that's an issue, because then I'm putting like the white is a white slip, not a white underglaze. So it's sort of like I was looking through my test tiles to see if I could find an example of one that was sort of not working great. I don't know if it'll be able to show up. You can see some blistering of the clay and then like this rough spot. So I found specifically with my clay, it's often the lighter blues and light greens, which is a shame because I really would love to try and use those colors. So I've been trying to figure out if there are different ways that I can get to use them. But it seems to me, because this, it's got a base color. Sorry, it's hard with the glare. Base color, then blue, turquoise, and a leaf green, and then white slip over it. And this is the white slip just a bit thinner here at the edges. And it's where the white slip is the thinnest, actually, that the turquoise is like it's bubbling and sort of pitted almost. But it's not where it's just clear glaze, and it's not where it's thicker.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Slip. So
confusing.
Yeah. So I'm just not going to use those colors is usually what I do. But, like there are certain colors I just kind of can't use. And I always, test out, we'll do just like a really basic test towel with different colors when I'm trying to find new ones. But you'll see these light ones just get like obliterated by my clay. Almost. Okay. Clay is so dark. Yeah. Oh, that's
interesting.
Yeah, Rebecca's suggesting trying the Spectrum underglazes in light blue and green. I will definitely give that a try.
Yeah, I wish I could see the comments better.
Yeah, there's a question from Jennifer, or a comment saying she found a collection of Ongo bases for different oxide colors. Bases were tweaked for fluxing action of the colorant. Could explain refractory underglaze if supplier uses only one base, especially like
Mm.
circuit packs. And there was a comment actually on that when I posted the announcement of this in Sika, someone, Patrick Coughlin, who's in Maine now, and he said he feels like the underglaze recipe has changed. And he didn't mention which brand it was, but that he used to be able to apply it at bisque without any. Sometimes applying it at bisque will then cause glaze absorption issues. Like the glaze is
Mm-hmm.
thinner in the spot where the underglaze is because it's not, the bisque isn't sucking it in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another main issue that I've seen is where like it looks like where you have the rough clear glaze surface over the underglaze and sometimes just with certain colors. But that was one of the things like I originally assumed is like, okay, well, if you apply the underglaze over bisque, then you are like blocking the pores so that they're not absorbing the glaze very well. But this issue is happening to people who are applying the underglaze before bisque.
Mm.
And so I'm very curious about, so it's like, it's not really about like the wet underglaze blocking the pores, but it could be that like the underglaze just being in part of the clay body, that's like somehow causing the bisque to be less absorbent and preventing a good adhesion of the glaze. So yeah, so it's like I'm not really seeing like this definitive pattern where it's always when you like where the answer is just apply underglaze at leather hard and then bisque fire and then you're good to go, because I'm seeing issues kind of in both scenarios. But it does definitely depend on which brand of underglaze you're using and also the thickness. I'm seeing like where the coat of underglaze is quite thick, that is one of the problems that's happening,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like you're not getting a nice shiny clear coat over top of the underglaze. Yeah. So.
Yeah, just seeing some of the questions. Thanks for the suggestion about the slip recipe being an issue. Some folks mentioning black and blue underglazes being sort of problematic more for them. I'd be curious, Emily, what brand those are. And again, if folks can go over and fill out Sue's survey, the link's in her Instagram bio, that would be awesome because all this information is super, super relevant. And there's a question, or just a comment from Jennifer that if underglaze is fluxing at bisque, and some of them seem to like they're rated 05 to 10, the Emico, but I know there's some that at cone 6 they're like super fluxed out.
Yeah. I remember it was like a Spectrum cobalt blue underglaze that was fluxing at bisque temperature. And so it was like just certain colors sometimes will flux at different temperatures. And I think it's a really good point, whoever mentioned about like having a different base depending on the colorant that is in the underglaze. And my friend Ronald Borson and he's kind of helping me with this project. And so we were talking about that, how the different colorants, some colorants are fluxes, some are refractory. And so putting all the colorants into one base doesn't really make sense because, the base should really compensate for either the fluxing or refractory properties of the colorant that's going into them. So if I don't know if the underglaze companies, like I would think that they would be doing this, but I honestly, I need some insider information from the underglaze companies. Maybe I should apply for a job.
But it'd be interesting. I mean, obviously a lot of folks use these products and we use them because like back when I started in school, it was impossible to get these like amazing, bright oranges and reds on clay, and they're, really user friendly, but still sort of figuring out some of these things. The question I think is for me, if I'm finding the bubbling pitting occurring only when the clear glaze is applied. Yeah, it comes out after the bisque, and I always cover my underglazes and slip with a clear glaze. It's usually pretty thin. So that for me, the bubbling and sort of pitting is happening where there's clear glaze. It's usually a pretty thin layer of clear glaze that I do. Um, Hannah saying bright orange is an issue.
Yeah, in the survey, there's a spot where you can tell me which colors have been a problem and then also which colors you've had success with, because that's really good information for me to know as well. I'm curious, do you ever sand your bisque?
Yeah, so I do. I sand and wash my bisque, partly because the process that I do, like on where this sort of orange thing is, that was a newspaper resist, and so and
Yeah.
then brush slip over it, and sometimes the edge can be kind of sharp. So
Yeah.
I like my clay is, you know, sort of polished smooth, so I wet sand and bisque and wet sand everything after bisque and wash it.
Okay.
Do you think is
That's good.
sanding an issue, or would it help more than anything?
I wouldn't think so, as long as you're washing the dust off after.
Yeah.
I wouldn't think so. And I would also be curious whether sanding would help. Like if there's like kind of a sealed layer of underglaze that's blocking the pores in the bisque, that could be sanding off like a kind of the top layer would expose the pores in the bisque that would help to absorb the glaze a little bit better.
Yeah.
Just a thought
Yeah.
I just had. Yeah.
Yeah, I've just always done it. And I, you know, and ceramics, when something is, you know, knock on wood, working for you, I just try not to change it.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. There's a question about if prices of underglaze make a difference on quality. I've just always used the Amico ones, again, because it's like what I've been familiar with and what's worked. And so I don't want to change it. But I don't know if you've had any experience with that, Sue.
Yeah, so at the rec center, the studio where I work, there's only 3 approved brands of underglaze that we allow into the studio, and that's just because we don't want underglaze applied to the bottom of something, fluxing, and then we're like placing, in the bisque, we're placing pots on top of pots. And so we don't want them sticking together. So we allow the Amico Velvet, the Chrysanthos, and the Speedball. And that's kind of in order of price. Like the Speedball is the cheapest, and then the Chrysanthos and the Amico Velvets are a little more expensive. I do personally find the Amico Velvets to be like a better quality underglaze. I think that they have more pigment in them, and they have like they like flow very nicely. So I think they have like some sort of gum or something in them that makes them like really nice and brushable. And we were talking yesterday, so one of the studio users, Katie, she was doing some screen printing tests where she was testing the 3 different underglazes. So we were doing silk screening onto paper, onto newsprint, and then transfers. And the Speedball underglazes, when the underglaze dries on the newsprint, it all just kind of flakes off. And because I think it has a high clay content, which leads to shrinkage. And so it's like the Amico and the Chrysanthos both are like have more pigment in them and less clay, I think, in the actual underglaze base. And so they stick better to the newsprint and then transfer nicely. But the Speedball ones, as soon as it dries, it all kind of flakes and falls off. So I mean, that's not to say that they're not good for other applications. And the Speedball ones, because they have this clay content, they might be better for applying to wetter clays, because then they shrink together. And so you might have issues if you're applying the Speedball underglazes to bone dry or to bisque. That could lead to some firing issues because of the shrinkage.
Yeah, it's interesting. A number of questions about the interaction sort of with clear glazes and, a zinc-free glaze versus, Amico's glaze. Just a couple folks mentioning that. I mean, I know there are certain underglazes that you're not supposed to use a zinc based glaze with. I think those are some of the pinks and stuff like that, but I don't know if you can sort of, that's out of my territory.
Yeah, well, zinc will react with the colors and change the colors. And so if you have zinc in your clear glaze, it's more likely to change the color of the underglaze so that it's not what you expect. So maybe you have like a pink underglaze and it comes out brown, and that's like because of the zinc in the clear glaze that goes over top. So I think that like certain colorants are going to react with the zinc and others don't. So that I think that's why they say for certain colors of underglaze, and like even mason stains, like if you're on the mason stain website, it also specifies to use a zinc-free clear for certain colorants. And that's just because of the color response. So yeah, you could be very surprised to like have your, like I think just pink or greens turn out brown. And then you're disappointed
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah. So that's the thing about zinc free. So if you use underglazes, it's good to have zinc free just for all of them, just because you're not going to have that color reaction.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Ceramica Botanica, I like that tag. On your 05 pieces having some flaking of underglaze. I'm curious at what stage that is, particularly on the underside edge of plates. That almost to me sounds like when you're applying it kind of thing. Like I know, yeah, and depending on the underglaze, some don't like to be applied when it's more bone dry or things like that. And it may be a thickness issue as well if it's flaking off sort of pre or post bisque would be my thought. But
yeah, like flaking is often a result of shrinkage. So depending at what stage the flaking is happening, but like, so you have, as we all know, clay shrinks when it dries, and all like underglazes are going to have some clay content in them. And was this speedball particularly, did she mention?
Don't mention, yeah.
Or they didn't. So if there's like, underglaze is going to have a bit of clay in it, just like to help it, the adhesion. So like attracts like, and so it's going to stick to the clay better if it has a bit of clay in it. But then if there's any shrinkage at all and your clay is done shrinking, but then your underglaze is still shrinking a little bit, even if it's not significant, it can just loosen the adhesion of the underglaze to the clay. And then maybe after bisque, or maybe not even until after the glaze firing, because there's not really any shrinkage that occurs during bisque. So all of the clay shrinkage basically happens during the drying phase and then in the glaze firing. And so you might not notice these issues after the bisque firing, but then once it goes into the glaze firing and then there's more shrinkage, then things are moving around and the underglaze can loosen a little bit more, and then you can have some flaking during the glaze firing.
Yeah, they just mentioned that it's after clear glaze firing and that they're using Duncan.
Okay, Duncan. Okay, cool. Yeah. So I don't have experience with that underglaze in particular. So I haven't I'm not sure how much it shrinks. But yeah, if you want to fill out my survey and just provide that information, that would be really good info for me to have, and then I can look at that.
Yeah, I think some of the results we were looking at just briefly yesterday seemed very clearly to be like an application issue, and that they seem to be applied like really thick. And I know with the Amicos, they say, 3 coats, I think, to get sort of like a solid bit of color on the clay. I guess and I think maybe why I've, again, knock on wood, had fewer issues is I'm actually just using 1 coat, but I'm layering them, so there is more than 1 coat, but I like the translucency, so I'm not looking for that like solid paint chip color. Like I want the colors to interact. But so I think, with everything, go with try what they say at first, but then if it's not working for you, do some tests. And, they're also, I'm not saying that they're trying to mislead us, but their object is to sell more underglaze. So if, maybe 2 coats is okay on your work, but again, I'm not saying that they're doing that in a nefarious way, but I
Yeah.
think it's always good to test things out.
Yeah. Another thing on that is like with the thickness. So it depends on the water content as well of your underglaze. So if your underglazes have been sitting around for a really long time, like years, like mine have, then there's a chance that some water has evaporated and you're going to end up with a much thicker, like per brush stroke, you're going to have a thicker coat of underglaze. And one thing that I wanted to mention is that I ordered some underglazes for the studio, and one of them in the bottle, it arrived and it was like pretty dried up. Like I think it had been sitting around. Nobody wanted that color. It was a pink underglaze. And so I added water and used a hand blender to blend it all up. And I just kind of eyeballed the water until it looked nice and fluid. And then I did a test, and the underglaze totally cracked during the drying stage and the firing stage. And so I determined that was because because of the high water content, I had added too much water to reconstitute the underglaze. And the reason clay shrinks when it dries is because the water content, like the water takes up space in between the clay particles. And then as the clay or the water evaporates, then those particles move closer together. And that's how the shrinkage happens. And so if you have an underglaze with really high water content and you apply a thick layer, then as that water evaporates, then those particles move closer together and shrink, and that's when you can get cracking. And so what I did was I went back to the bottle of underglaze, and there was like a significant layer of water on top. So I just poured the excess water off, like the clear water off, and then gave it a mix again, and then it's been working pretty well ever since. And so if you're having issues where your underglaze is cracking during the drying process, I would check. So let's see, like you can see this has been sitting for a while. So there is a layer of water on top. And so the one that I'm talking about, it had like the one that I had added water to, it had like a really thick layer of water on top. And so I would just pour the excess water off the top, maybe hold it to the side, give it a mix. If it's too thick after you pour all the water off the top, add a little bit back in. But I think excess water can lead to some adhesion problems because as the underglaze shrinks, those particles are moving, and then that could also loosen the adhesion to the clay surface as well, and then lead to firing problems, maybe in the glaze firing.
Yeah, there's another comment from someone saying that they had bad shivering with Amico white applied to leather hard and also bisque on 3 different clays. Amico said it was because the gum in the underglaze went bad.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard that gum goes bad, but then like they should have expiry dates on the underglazes. Like if there's a shelf life for the gum, then they should be like printing the manufacturer date of that bottle of underglaze maybe. But I haven't actually experienced myself the gum going bad or
yes, mentioning that they thin their underglaze with CMC gum.
Okay.
Like a CNC gum water solution.
Yeah, and that's a good way to thin it down because you're going to get less shrinkage. So if you're thinning it down with CNC gum rather than just water, there's going to be less evaporation. So then there's less like shrinkage which would lead to the crawling or the flaking or the shivering.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, like none of my underglazes have gone bad. I just haven't experienced that, but I have heard other people definitely say that when they add CMC to their glaze, then it goes bad, and that it definitely has a shelf life to it. I just haven't used it a lot. Like I haven't really added it to too many things.
Speaking of going bad, maybe you can, I mean, I feel like I know the answer to this question, but there are certain of my underglazes that get like black inside the jar and are super stinky, like sulfury smell. But yeah, when I was at a residency, I would have to say, it's the underglaze, it's not me. I'm opening the yellow. I assume
Yeah,
bone ash or something in it that is some kind of material, like um, organic material that's just going bad, but
yeah. I mean,
the
I've definitely,
color, the fired color or anything, it just smells horrible.
right, like a bucket of clay recycling.
Yeah.
Yeah, that stinky smell. Yeah, interesting. I just want to note. I mean, like I bought these in 2009. Yeah, so there's no smell.
It's only on certain ones. There's like three different ones.
Okay,
It doesn't happen on, it's like the yellow, the orange, and the red it'll happen on.
okay,
Yeah.
that's interesting. Good
Yeah.
to know.
But it never happens with the blues. There's one other question, which actually I sometimes have this issue. Person saying the Insomnicat, which I like that tag too. When I apply too many layers, I end up with all these little holes in the glaze and underglaze. Why does this happen?
Yeah, that reminds me of the picture we were looking at
Yeah,
yesterday. Um, so I, so the thing about underglazes is they contain colorants, and during the glaze firing, colorants release oxygen gas. Like they release a gas, and the gas, um, is creates bubbles in the surface of the glaze. I find, like just from the pictures that I've seen, if the if the layer of underglaze is really really thick, that is there's a good chance you're going to get pitting because there's so much colorant. Like underglazes have high pigment, so like in a glaze recipe we would add like maybe 2% copper
right.
to something. And like an underglaze is going to have way more than that. And so there's a lot of off gassing that can occur. And I think that it just kind of takes over the glaze. And so the pitting is like bubbles that have like popped on the surface of the glaze and just haven't healed over. And I think that reducing the thickness of your underglaze is going to be the best bet for that. Like if you are applying several layers of underglaze, maybe cut down on the layers, just because like I think there's it's just like the science of it. It just like the clear glaze can't handle that much like bubbling and then just smooth over.
Would
Yeah, and the temperature would make a difference as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say I wonder, and this like I bisque hotter and like it's quite a long bisque to sort of get you again because it's like a dark clay which tends to have a lot of stuff that's sort of off
Mm,
gassing and the like. So I bisque hotter and longer. So
yeah.
that might mitigate it. Interesting comment that I just want to mention from the person who was talking about the gum issues that when they spoke to Amico had said they told them it starts to degrade in 2 years and is completely degraded by 4 sooner if you use undistilled water, which that's interesting because I will sometimes thin mine if I've been using them too long with a little spritz of water, but it's always just tap water. So undistilled is that's a good tip. I hadn't thought of that. I always forget about.
So they're recommending distilled water.
Sorry, yes, it degrades faster if you use just tap water. So they're recommending distilled water. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I know people their glazes have really changed when they've gone to, a well system or something like that.
Yeah, I should check because I was at an Inseca. It was either 2016 or 2018, but I got like a little sample of an Amico underglaze. And so that's been over 4 years, I would say. So I should check to see like what because I haven't used it. It's just been sitting there all this time. Because I
Yeah.
wonder like if you're using it, if it breaks down more faster, or like if it's like in the sealed container, if it wouldn't be breaking down.
Yeah, because it hasn't got oxygen. Um,
Yeah.
a question that is not a stupid question, but they're saying it's beginner question, and I'd love to hear your answer to this because I feel like I have my own answer, but I know it's not as sound as yours probably is, Sue. Is what is the difference between colored slip and underglaze?
Hmm. Yeah, I would say the clay content. So slip is like a colored clay, basically, and an underglaze or an on-gobe, as they're sometimes called, is like more about the color, more about the pigment. And so with slips, you can have texture, like where like it's like clay, like a wet clay that has color in it, but it's more about like it just the way it works is like you can like have like yeah like create texture because you're applying like a thicker substance, whereas underglaze is more about the color, so it's there's a lower clay content and a higher colorant content generally, but they're very similar. And it's just a matter of like slips, if you want to be working with wet, like adding colored slips to wet clay, like that you've just thrown or something, then the slip is going to shrink along with the clay. And so slips can't be really applied unless you're creating a slip with like calcined clay or something. They can't really be applied at bone dry or after bisque because then there's too much shrinkage and they'll just fall off.
Great answer.
Yeah, and so slips, like you can easily create a slip with your clay body by adding a bit of color into it. Whereas underglazes, I mean, you can get a recipe to make underglaze, and I used to make them for the studio. It ended up just being easier, probably more cost effective with my time to just buy the commercial underglazes, and they just work better. I was finding I tried so many different underglaze recipes, and it was just really hard to get an underglaze that would work at all the stages that people were using them. Whereas the commercial underglazes that you buy, they've gone through tons of testing and they have their little secrets of like how they get them so you can apply them to leather hard and bone dry and bisque.
Right. Yeah. And for folks asking with the bisque, when I talked about bisque hotter and longer, so I bisque to 04, and it's
Mm-hmm.
about a 17, 18-hour cycle.
Mm.
So I can, if people want to shoot me an email at naomi@naomiclement.com, I can send you my firing schedule. My slip and my clear glaze recipe are on my website, naomiclement.com, on the process page. But yeah, just don't DM me because it's hard. I can't send an attachment on a DM, but if you email me. Someone mentions giving the surface of underglazed bisque a bit of a spritz of water before clear glazing helps eliminate some of the tiny bubbles.
Mm.
I wonder why that would be.
I would think because like sorry, I lost the word. Basically, if you wet the surface, then the glaze is going to stick to the water. So like you don't want to saturate the bisque with water because then there's no like room in the bisque for the water from the glaze. But if you wet the surface, then like the water attracts water. There's like the cohesion
Oh,
between. So it might, if you wet the surface, it kind of like gives the water a pathway to flow. So like if you've ever seen like a drip of water running down, if it comes in contact with more water, it's going to go where that water is leading it. But if there's like a dribble of water going down like a dry surface, the water is going to kind of stay like the surface tension of the water holds it together. But as soon as water comes in contact with more water, it kind of like disperses and spreads out and will go like to all the wet areas. And so I think, yeah, that's like if you just give like a little spritz, I think that's a really good tip, because then that would help because like the dry bisque, if you think of it like it's this bumpy surface, like on a on a macro level, there's this bumpy surface and all these holes and there's pores through the bisque. And then if you dip in a glaze, you could have little pockets of air where the wet glaze doesn't really get in to those little air pockets. But if it's already wet, then it kind of like invites the glaze in to stick a little bit better.
Very cool.
I think.
Yeah. Yeah. No, other questions? Some Stern Sue is asking if they add deflocculant to the colored slip. I'm guessing that's if you're wondering if you add deflocculant to the colored slip, could you apply it to bone dry? Or that doesn't, I mean, maybe if you really dialed that in, you could figure that out. But I find with most slips, it would be more of an on-go, I think, that had like more of a flux in it, wouldn't it? Or
so deflocculating allows you to, because slip is mostly clay, if you deflocculate it, it allows you to have a wetter slip with less water content. And the water, like more water equals more shrinkage. And so if you deflocculate it, basically you're lowering the viscosity of the slip, making it runnier without adding extra water. And so that would be a way to use slips so that there's less shrinkage. So if you're applying them to bone dry or even bisque, I would maybe use like a combination of some calcined clay, which is like clay that's already been fired and shrunk a little bit. And then deflocculating, that could create a slip for sure that you could apply at bone dry or at after bisque. Yeah, so that's a really good point.
Cool. And then, Kathy makes a point that with your analogy with spritzing with the water, attracting water, it's like a dry sponge doesn't suck up water quickly, but a damp sponge does.
Exactly, yeah. Totally.
Science. Don't we love science?
Yes.
So we started at just before 1 and it's about a little after 1:45. I know we'll get cut off at the hour point with a 5. So if there are any last questions, and maybe Sue and I will just mention too, we're going to save this. If you didn't, I tried to get to most of the questions. And again, we've got some time to answer some more, but a great spot is to go over to Sue's free Facebook group. You just have to answer a question to join. Like it's a private group, but it's free. Understanding Glazing with Sue, and that info is in your link in bio, correct?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Sue McCloud Ceramics, and then I've got workshops on my techniques for how I use underglazes, and then also all of my work is hand built, so I do a lot of hand building workshops as well. And then I've got a workshop coming up beginning of October that's exciting. It's called Studio Logistics. So it's me and 4 other awesome female makers talking about how we set up our studios. So you can check all that in my link in bio, and we will be saving this as well.
Yeah. I don't know if you can send it to me. If you can, I'll post it on my social media.
I'm sure if I can. Well. I'll see if how that works. Yeah, thanks everyone for the questions, and please do. Sue wants to get over 100 folks filling out her survey, so everyone here had really thoughtful, insights into what's worked for them and what hasn't. So the more people that Sue gets filling out her survey, the more results she'll have for it. So, and you can for Sue's newsletter too, because I'm assuming you'll share the.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, please, I need 3 more to reach 100, which which was my goal. And this, I started this like it was the beginning of August, I think, that when I first put this out. Yeah, so it's been a couple months collecting data. And there's a place where you can send me photos of your results. And even if you have only had successful results with your underglazes, there's an option to fill out the form to describe the conditions of your successful results, which would be amazing. And so you can, in the first question is like, which issue have you been having? Or have you not been having issues? And you can select that option. And then you can tell me like at what stage you apply your underglaze, what the brand is, whether you re-bisque fire it, and then what glaze and what temperature you're firing to, like your bisque temperature and your glaze temperature and all of that. Whatever info you have, it doesn't matter if you need to skip some questions, that's totally fine. Yeah, all info is good. So yeah, I would love it if some of you could, yeah, send me the conditions of your successful results as well, because that will help me figure some things out.
Cool.
Cool.
Yeah, there was one question if you were making a list of underglazes that like stick on the bottom of pots and those that don't. I don't know if there's a list of that anywhere. Like flux.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't really like, I know that the Spectrum Cobalt Blue one stuck, but like we were trying to avoid that in the studio. And so I don't really, if anyone has information about like your underglaze fluxing at a certain temperature, that could be something that you could share with me as well. And then I can share it with everybody.
Question for your Facebook group too to see, because as Sue mentioned, the awesome thing about that Facebook group is, I mean, Sue comments on it and answers questions, but there's also a ton of other really like people who know what they're talking about who are part of the group who will answer questions too. So it's just a great place to share these kind of questions. So if you didn't get your question answered today or have sort of more discussion that you want to have around your question, definitely encourage you to head on over there and check that out. Yeah, was there anything else you wanted to mention? Sue, you've got your glaze mixing workshop launching. The early bird pricing for that ends soon, I think, right?
Yeah, so right now, so if you don't currently mix your own glazes from scratch and you want to learn how, yeah, I have an online workshop. So registration is open. There's an early bird discount until next Wednesday. So it's $97 US right now, and the price will be going up to $127 after that. And so you get 6 months access to the workshop, and there's a live Zoom call every month that you're in the program. And so the first Zoom call will be next Thursday. And so that's just an opportunity for you to come and ask me your questions. And you have 6 months so you can mix some glazes and then go fire. I also teach you how to do a color run where you take a base glaze and test it with multiple colorants. So you can go do some testing, come back, show me your results, ask me your questions, and then carry on. And so that is all in my bio. Click my bio. There's lots of like fun links that you can find there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Well, yeah, hopefully you'll head on over to both our feeds and check out what we've got going on. We both love to teach people virtually and answer questions. And I've got my professional practices workshop that's going to be coming up as well, which I mentioned at the beginning that I've been working on, which is sort of boot camp for artists, like artist statements, CVs, social media for artists, websites, taking photos, all those things. So if you sign up for my newsletter, you'll get info on that. But I think we've got all the questions we could answered. And thank you so much for your time today, Sue. It's been
thank you.
Learning from you. As I've said before, I'm so grateful that there are people like you in the world who like to do this kind of research, because my brain does not function that way. So there's lots of thank yous and hearts coming up on the screen. So thank you so much for your time, and thanks everyone for joining. I'm going to save this in the IGTV.
Cool.
Okay.
Awesome.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.